Well, so now we're moving on to the last problem. So in this problem, what I want to do is return all the pairs of x and y where they're not equal to each other, but after I apply some function f onto them, then they become equal to each other. So in this very first example, we see that we return -1 and 1 because by themselves, -1 is not equal to -1, but after I apply the absolute value, -1 becomes 1 and they're equal to each other. But we also see that -2 and -2 are not in our return statement. And that's because they're equal to each other, and even though their absolute values are equal to, we're not looking for values that were equal from before. So with that, let's get into the problem. So when I'm doing this problem, I think that I'm going to have to iterate through the list. So I also probably want to keep track of some return list and just add pairs into there. So ultimately, I'm going to be returning this list. Right. So if I say I want to kind of say that I'll go through each value of my list, and then that's going to be my x, and then once I find that x, like x here, sorry, then I want to find, is there anything else in the rest of the list that it also is not equal to x, but once I apply the function, it is equal to x. And then after I do that, I want to move on to the next one and then check in the rest of the list. And then after I do that one, I want to check here and do the rest, do the rest of this list, and so on. Right. So in order to do that, it sounds like I'm going to have to use 2 for loops, and I'm going to have to probably nest them too. So in order to nest them, I'm going to need the exact index of what my first for loop is at, right? Because my next for loop is going to start the index after it. So I'm going to do for some I in range length of s, right? And this will allow every single one of them to be touched, right? And then, so once I have some I value, I want to also assign some j value for some range, but I only care about the list that's in front of it, or else I'm going to have duplicates, right? So I'm going to have some range, and I'm going to do some that's starting at I plus 1 and all the way until the end of s, right? So remember that I'm always going to be finishing this for loop before I restart or increment the outer for loop, right? So if my I is here at 2, then my j is going to be moving from 1, then 0, then 1, then -2. And then after that loop is done, I'm going to be incrementing I. So now I is -1, and then my j is going to be 0, 1, and then -2. Cool. So now that I've done that, I can check now that if si is, as long as it's not equal to s of j, then as long as it's also that f of s of I is equal to f of s of j, then I can add this pair into my return list. So I see here that I also wrote s of I, s of j, and s of j twice. So just to clean up the code a bit, I'm going to kind of create some just variables. So I'll just say x equals xy equals s of I and s of j. And then if x is not equal to y and f of x is equal to f of y, then I want to add those values into my return list. Cool. And then in the end, whoops, I forgot. It's not supposed to be, yeah. Cool. So yeah, and then in the end, I'm going to be returning my list of matches that I have, and we are now done with the test.